In the year 7564 before Christ, an alien ship appears in the high orbit of the Earth. It's something the Earth hasn't seen in a long time, a Takigawa Shay state military ship, a little Ogiwa-class warship with 670 people on board, crew members, soldiers and military.
Professor Nar, actually how powerful were these warships? Because the fact that they are Ogiwa-class warships tell us nothing. But somehow they sound quite dangerous.
State Ogiwa-class ships were very powerful at that time. From the data we have today related to those ships, it seems that Ogiwa-class was much feared by the enemies.
Ogiwa-class warship had a crew of 321 members. They could carry about 800 soldiers. They were mixed ships used in hunting, bombing, troop transport and landing missions.
Ogiwa ships were moving at high speed in the battle zone, navigating very fast among the large ships, firing especially with weapons mounted on the front of the fuselage, causing considerable damage to the targets.
Ogiwa ships also had a number of 12 combat shuttles specialized in search and destruction missions.
In the archives that have been preserved after the disappearance of the Takigawa race and the collapse of Shay state, records have been found from several wars between Shay and other states. But what was particularly surprising was the Shay fleet's attack on an Anunnaki fleet focusing on the orbit of the planet Marjul. The attack was carried out with 128 warships, 89 of which were of the Ogiwa class. Records show how efficient these ships were. In fact, more than 50% of Anunnaki's ships were destroyed in this battle, which led to a major change in the balance of power in that sector, with Anunnaki losing its predominant position for a time.
But what was that ship doing on Earth?
Shay were looking for an ore that seems very difficult to find in the galaxy, and one of these deposits with that ore was on your planet.
What ore was it?
We can't know exactly. In their archives, Shay talks about an ore called Ostromissile, but we have not been able to identify it with any ore known today.
For 3 months, the Shay ship has been conducting surveys and prospecting, rock and sediment analysis. After collecting and analyzing the data, the researchers on the ship decided to create a mining operation in what they called the Jepawa Islands.
For a long time, I could not know exactly where Jepawa was. It could just as well be Japan, Indonesia, or New Zealand. But research by archaeologists in recent years on the planet Takigawa in the capital Inshu has led us to discover several ancient archives. Among them, a hologram map of your planet with the exact location of the Jepawa mining outpost, and this corresponds to the islands of Japan.
Meanwhile, a mining ship appears in the orbit. Very large ships, the Shay mining ships, carried all the materials needed to create a mining operation.
For Takigawa Shay, mining was a state issue. In fact, this industry was directly subordinated to the army and was patronized by it.
In the first phase, the soldiers on the warship creating a security perimeter in the chosen place in Japan. Although they were few, their very advanced fighting technique and the 12 shuttles patrolling the territory from the air allowed them to settle safely. After securing the perimeter, the mining ship landed at the established location and began installing mining devices and digging a well for the operation.
How many workers have been brought for this operation?
That was the problem. Shay had problems with the labor force because a large part of the population served in the army, the military being an occupation of great honor, and very few of those who worked actually work in mines, so Shay used slaves.
The records show that the mine was to be served by about 24,000 people, divided into 4 shifts, 6 hours each in the early years, and then expanded to 10 times as many miners. Shay decided to use humans, but at that time the population of the planet was not very large and people were not used to this kind of work.
In the islands, the population was small and considered to be of poor quality, so in addition resorted to the abduction of entire tribes in the present-day regions of Siberia, China and Indonesia.
How many people were deported to serve in the mine?
Over time, about 150,000. Mortality was very high among the people, and that is why other people are always brought.
Okay, but how were so many people transported?
The mining ship was equipped with 6 air carriers specialized in transporting workers. About 200 people could enter off these ships at a time.
Shay had set up his mining base and began gathering people from all over East Asia, but especially from Siberia and Indonesia. But they encountered a major problem. People were afraid of these gods flying in the sky and descending from some unbelievable cars for them. So they fled and hid in forests and caves trying to escape.
Mining reports say Shay soldiers had enough trouble catching people. Attacks on the people's villages occurred especially at night. Hunting shuttles flew over the site, scattering flammable liquid around the village and igniting it. The village was surrounded by flames. At that moment, the transport ship was descending in the middle of the village. Shay's soldiers began to guide people to the ships by signs, sometimes by violence, and embark them. The flight from any location in East Asia to the mining base did not take more than 30 minutes.
Nearly 50,000 people were gathered and settled in the city built especially for them. But the level of people in those days was far too low for such a coexistence. They soon began to fight among themselves, and when they saw the gods, they kneeled in fear and did not move from there.
Shay soon realized that they had a problem. People were simply too scared to be used at work. In addition, they were so stressed that there were daily fights between ethnic groups.
Shay decided to take action. They took the people out of the mining town and moved them to smaller villages, where they kept people separated. The tribes with stronger and more robust people were co-opted to be a part of the police. These people were trained and prepared to become the guardians of this farm.
Reports say that these measures immediately led to an improvement in people's mental health. They got along more easily with their human guards because they were always scared when they saw shy entities. My broadcast must end here. I would like my messages to reach as many people as possible. Otherwise, everything we do here won't help you much.
Thank you, Professor Nar. Thank you for this new interview, and I confess that although you have already told me a lot about these things, there are always other new stories that we didn't get the chance to talk about before starting this series. That is why I look forward to the next discussion on the occupation of Japan. Dear friends, please share, subscribe, like, and most importantly, leave a comment with your questions. Your support is very important, as we are now very limited in the possibility of making Professor Nar message known.